Okay, sexting. I know this is always a big concern, especially for parents. I've done this a bit with some parent groups that I work with. But just some basic information here. Sexting is defined as any messages consisting of sexually suggestive or explicit words, pictures, or videos that are sent, received, or forwarded by text or online. About 1 in 5 youth sends sexts, 1 in 3 youth receives them, and 1 in 7 have forwarded sexts without consent from the person in the photo. And this is coming from a meta-analysis called Are Youth Sexting Rates Still on the Rise? A little bit more information on that. Females received sexts at a higher rate. Older youth were more likely to send them, and youth of all ages received sexts at a similar rate. So this is pretty intuitive, but some potential impacts of sexting are embarrassment, loss of control, unexpected sharing or use of sex content, or loss of trust, diminished mental health, right? Risk for depression, anxiety, suicide, self-harm, sextortion, where, someone says, well, I have this photo of you, you better do XYZ or I'll send it. And one that I always try to talk to youth about with a balanced perspective is the legal consequences. Because someone who is a minor can be charged with creation, possession, or distribution of child pornography if the person in the photo or video is under 18 years old. And, I've said before, I don't like fear tactics. I don't think they typically work. And I try not to present that information as a fear tactic, but more so as a potential consequence that young people might not realize, right? If I'm 16 or 17 years old, I'm not thinking of myself as a child. I'm thinking of myself as maybe a young adult or a teen, but it's not often going to be in my mind that, oh, if I take a photo of myself, an explicit photo, that in the eyes of the law, I am still a child, right? And so I could be charged as the person who took the photo with creation of child pornography. And this has happened in different places across the country. I'm not saying for sure that it will happen if it gets out and gets into the wrong hands, but that is a very serious consequence that young people often aren't thinking about because they don't think of themselves as children. And this can be very, very impactful to their lives long term. So felony charges, being on the sex offenders registry, these things have come up. There are some places where legislation is in place to sort of take into account the young people and sexting piece of it, because it's not the same, as some of the other cases of child pornography, but it definitely runs the risk of young people coming down with that. So I always tell them, I don't take this to scare you or freak you out or shame you, but this can happen. And the other impact of sexting is like nothing at all could happen. And I think we can recognize that as well, that sometimes young people send each other photos that are explicit and there are no consequences. And that happens too. And that's the reality of it. But I do think that we need to have that conversation and also encourage parents and caregivers to have that conversation. If we're talking about all the social media and technology stuff, we also want to talk about sexting. So really making sure to have the conversation, even if it hasn't affected teens in your community or hasn't, to your knowledge, hasn't affected them. Being specific, because teens may or may not know what sexting actually entails. So there are lots of different things. It could be words, it could be images, it could be videos, it could be just one body part, it could be a whole thing. Like there's so many different things, and making sure that they understand what all is under that umbrella. Explaining potential consequences, but again, like I said just a moment ago, trying to avoid those scare tactics, because often those also prevent teens from asking for help when they need it. And finally, sharing risk reduction strategies. Risk reduction, I think, is also a part of the sexting piece. The least risky behavior is not to do this at all. However, if teens still decide to engage in this type of activity, there are ways to reduce the risk. And I know that might seem a little bit, I don't know, maybe controversial, but I do think it's worth having that conversation if young people are going to go down that road. So there are things you can do to keep yourself safe. Like, again, same with sexual intercourse, same with substance use. Like, I don't want you to do this thing. And if you are going to decide to do it, I want you to be safe. So here's some things that they can do. So not sharing any sex that are sent to you. If you do choose to send one, make sure you know and trust the person fully and ensure you have consent to send it, right? We're not just willy-nilly sending to someone who doesn't want it. Consider something more boudoir style instead of something that's nude, because that is going to have more covering, more protection. Never include your face and avoid including identifiable aspects of the body. So tattoos, piercings, personalized jewelry, etc. Disable location services, so the geolocation on photos from your phone. If you are being pressured, collecting evidence, taking screenshots to share, and promptly deleting any explicit content that you do receive. So again, this might be, not the most comfortable conversation, especially for encouraging parents and caregivers to talk about sexting risk reduction. But I do, again, see it kind of going hand in hand with that risk reduction in terms of sexual contact of any sort. This is kind of under that umbrella as well. It's an interesting line between normalizing sexting and sharing concerns and precautions. It's exactly the same way I feel when I teach STI prevention when it comes to sex ed. Absolutely, it is that fine line between saying like, this, not doing this is the safest way to go, and if you're going to choose to do it anyway, I want you to be safe.